Hello, everyone. I'm Terry Modishead, the Executive Director of the Centre for Legal Innovation at the College of Law, and I am absolutely delighted to be here with you today on choosing the right ROI and metrics for your project, and particularly your legal innovation project. There's really no people better to chat about this than Ben Gouldson and Shirley Jane S.J. Price, who are going to be leading this session for you and sharing their experience as well. No matter where you are on your innovation projects, you are at some point in time, and often sooner than we often anticipate, going to be asked about what the return on investment or the metrics are that you're going to measure success or advancement with, or even failure, actually. They can also be pretty important. So I'm going to hand over to Ben and SJ, who are going to take you through everything that you need to know about this.
Thank you, Terry, and good to see you all. Thank you for participating. SJ and I are really excited about getting underway this morning on this topic. And from our point of view, we're very happy to make it as interactive as possible, aren't we, SJ?
Absolutely, Ben. Thank you. Great to be here.
So what we thought we'd do is SJ and I will sort of share the presentation. There'll be a few slides that I talk to and SJ might comment upon, and then equally there'll be some slides that SJ will primarily speak to. They're really extracting from our own collective experiences, and they hopefully are a good generator of discussion or some ideas discussion. So what we'd like you to do is feel free to ask those questions, participate in the conversation. There's no doubt that SJ and I do not believe for a moment that we are the wise holders of all wisdom here. This is just our shared experience, and we welcome the insights and the experiences that you guys have had in your particular positions, in your particular organisations. A little bit about me, and then I'll throw to SJ to sort of tell you a little bit about her. I'm a legal practitioner, director of a law firm called Clifford Gouldson Lawyers, and that firm's been around in Queensland for about 16 years. I've been practicing law for over 25 years now. Clifford Gouldson is a firm that is a more traditional firm. We saw over time, as we pushed into startup space, we saw a need to pivot and change and embrace new ways of doing things. So we started our new startup firm called Bolter, Make It Happen. It's, people may have heard of Bolter, the beer. That was just a pure coincidence, I promise you. But anyway, we started that firm. It's a national firm effectively operating in a digital way. And so we've been able to trial or experiment a whole heap of legal innovation technologies or changing mindsets in that firm. And then we implement them into the Clifford Gouldson machine if it works well. And so that's been our experiment, play, and then implement project since Bolter launched at the height of the pandemic in 2020. So that's a little bit about me. SJ can explain what her background is and what brings her to the table today.
Fabulous. Hey, thanks a lot, Ben. So I'm an in-house counsel, like some of you on the call at Chevron Australia. My interest in innovation has brought me to all sorts of different things, but most importantly, it brought me to meet Terry, for which I'm very grateful. I do a lot of innovation work in Chevron, in legal innovation, just doing it within our own organisation. And I have to confess to having some successes, but frankly, a lot of failures, but I'd like to call them interim failures. So I'm excited to talk about metrics, because metrics is one of the ways you can get some signposts as to how your innovation is going. I'm also the inaugural chair of ACC Australia's Legal Technology and Innovation Committee. So the mission there really is to get in-house counsel talking to each other and sharing innovations. And to build on something that Ben said, we need to just do it. So don't let misunderstanding or lack of information on metrics or tech or anything else stop you. The best way to learn about innovation is to actually start doing it. Thanks, Ben. Over to you.
So what SJ has come up with today, which is a fantastic, I think, reference to a fantastic Mission Impossible suite of movies, is your mission, should you choose to accept it today, is that at the end of the session, you'll have a project goal, and for that project goal, you'll have 2 or more metrics that you'll be able to identify for that project goal. So we really do want this to be purposeful. You know, often we have things on in our days, and I find myself increasingly asking, for what purpose is that going to actually happen? For what purpose? So your mission today is, at the end of this discussion, you'll have that project goal in mind and 2 or more project metrics. So let's get cracking and let's see how you go. Now, SJ has put together a QR code, and we really would love to hear from you guys. SJ, do you want to just talk people through this?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's just really simple. Click on the QR or take a photo of the QR code, go to the link. It's a little form, right? It just asks you about where you're from and just, you know, where you are in terms of metrics, just so we can get a feel for who's on the call. It would be great if you could fill it out. And I'm watching here on my screen to see the responses coming in. We'll let you know in a tick. Thanks.
So real time, it's fantastic. And what this will enable us to do is just make sure that we're tailoring the presentation as much as we possibly can to you, the audience. So I'll leave that there for a little bit longer and let everyone fill it out. Hopefully everyone has a functional camera on a device that enables that. There is this if you need to cut and paste it, but I don't know that that's so easy. So I'll just leave that up a bit longer. How are we going, SJ? Have we had some people coming through?
Not quite yet, Ben, but give me a couple of minutes and I'll give you an update. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So what I wanted to, I guess, address, and this is based on the experiences that we've had at Clifford Goulston and within Bolter, is what's the most pressing priority around identification of a project. And from our experience, it's about identifying that pain point that might exist in your business or in your client's business or in the organization. And we've all experienced this. It might be that triple touch of data. And each time we see a typographical error because someone has, in their rush to do their job, you know, I had one the other day, the client surname, the contact at the client surname was Weir, W-E-I-R. And in the notes against the client, the surname was typed Weird with a D. Now, can you just imagine how awkward that would have been if there had been a contact made to that client, you know, maybe a formal invitation to some event or a seminar or webinar, and the client had been called Weird. So, you know, it's one of those examples of pain points that you need to be aware of. Equally, you need to consider what market opportunity or what issue in the marketplace might be there. So a current example might be around a heavy load of inquiries to law firms around advice in respect of mandatory vaccinations. So there may be a current market opportunity or an issue that's prevalent in the marketplace that is a real opportunity to build a project around using some kind of technology or innovation to deliver advice for mutual advantage. There might be an efficiency challenge. So you might find that in the cut and thrust of what you're doing with your client, you're finding that the project is getting particularly bogged down at a particular stage. Maybe there's not an efficient way for instructions to be taken. It could be as simple as that. And you've got 3 or 4 different instructors all needing to weigh in. Or in your organization, there might be 3 or 4 different approval decision makers. And maybe there's inefficiency around how that approval is being sought. So that will help you identify the project. Is there anything you want to add to that, SJ?
No, that's brilliant, Ben. The only thing I have to add is the results are in.
Great.
And about 2/3 of our people are actually from law firms. And then the rest of our participants are evenly split between in-house roles, hi to all of you, and tech startups and side hustles. Interestingly, in terms of experience from 1 to 5, 1 being a newbie and 5 being a guru, it's about 2.8. So we've got absolute gurus and probably absolute newbies. So look, welcome to you all. And, you know, you gurus, you might want to step away and get a coffee for some of this discussion, but it really is great to have you involved because you can certainly teach us all a lot. Of the project goals, we have about 2/3 of people who are still working on their project goals, but a third of us have actually already got the goals finalized. And also with respect to metrics, about half of the people actually do have their metrics finalized. So that's a really interesting set of data. So thanks so much for filling out those forms, everyone. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks, SJ. That is interesting. So what that means is that we really should be able to get somewhere by the end of the session and the discussion today, and hopefully you guys are comfortable to participate. I say this in a lot of webinars or seminars that I deliver. There are no dumb questions. There is only the risk of a dumb answer. So all of the risk is with SJ and I. So you guys have a free shot. Any questions or comments, please come forward with them. The next thing I wanted to do was then to talk about, well, okay, we've identified a project, whether it's come through a pain point or an opportunity or an efficiency risk. We then need to identify, well, what are the right goals that would make that project a success? And we need to really hone in on this, because when we're talking about return on investment or the right metrics, this type of step back and consider is critical. We really need to step back and consider what would demonstrate the solving of that pain point, if it's a pain point that you've identified that becomes the project. What would prove that the market issue or concern or opportunity has been met or delivered? And what would efficiency actually look like? So the classic would be in that triple touch point of data. The efficiency would be a single touch point, and arguably a metric around accuracy, so that we make sure that we're not having errors and not having more than one touch point when we're gathering data. As simple as that. That might be a really useful efficiency metric. From your experience, SJ, when it comes to people who are partway through, we had, I think, was 2/3 had identified a project and half had identified their metrics. I'd be interested in your views and your experiences around how often the goals or the metrics are revisited and need to change partway through.
Yeah, absolutely. So with respect to metrics, I think metrics do change a lot depending on what phase you're in. So if you're looking at the possibility of starting an innovation project, you might have some baseline metrics that you need to look at. One, to give you a baseline to evaluate any improvements, but two, to actually see what is the likelihood of this innovation succeeding, bearing in mind that the overwhelming majority of innovations, particularly legal innovations, fail, at least in the interim.
Don't they somewhat? So what we've got is we've got the goal, and then we've got that metric that we need to measure the demonstrating the solving of the pain point, or the proving the market issue has been met, or the proving of the efficiency gains. Now, these metrics, as SJ said, they might be shifting, or they might be simple, medium, hard at different stages of the project. And it's important that we do that step back and consider and think about what metric is right at what point of the project in its inception, development, and then delivery. And if we get this right, well, then that's the best way you'll be able to demonstrate to people that you're reporting up to, or reporting around or down to. That's the best way for you to demonstrate that there is going to be some return on the investment associated with that particular project. You'll be able to say, look, there has been this time saving, or there has been this reduction in error rate, or there has been this cost of production saving. There has been this increased profitability as a result of a write-up, if you're a billing practice, a write-up in terms of this product cost to produce versus the value of the product in the marketplace. So those types of metrics can then point to the return on investment that the investor might want to undertake.
And Ben, to build on that,
yes.
Interestingly, in some innovation projects, the return on investment is actually the redeployment of resources from something that's automated to do something that is of much higher value. So sometimes these things can be a little more complicated in that they involve two different activities. For example, if you have an automation app and that frees up your procurement people to focus on the higher risks, then that's a really good return on investment.
Great example, SJ. And I suppose at the end of the day, we want people to be doing their great work, not necessarily their poor
Exactly.
work. And that's one of the wonderful things about innovation, is if you can leverage people doing less of their poor work and more of their great work, the organisation goes ahead, but also the individual has greater levels of job satisfaction.
Absolutely.
Greater levels of autonomy and independence. That's often the case. And less of a feeling of being replaceable cog in a machine. They're much more the human element delivering their best work. So what I thought I'd do is, just by reference to a couple of examples of things that we've done at Clifford Gilson and at Bolter, I thought I'd step through a few, I guess, opportunities or efficiency challenges that we had that we tried to then find solutions for, and then talk to you a little bit about the metrics we used to measure whether or not they were worthwhile. So what's on the slide here is what we used to do at Clifford Gilson a little while ago, and we've now taken it to the next stage. So originally, we'd take instructions from clients, often face-to-face meetings, pre-COVID. We would interview the client. We would literally interview the client, asking questions around what they might need to put together into their terms and conditions for selling goods and services for their business. And then we got to a point where we thought, well, wouldn't it be useful if we could send them this checklist ahead of or after an initial meeting and allow them to complete it? Because sometimes the client that might be the instructor wouldn't necessarily have all of the questions. So often we would ask questions and they'd say, oh, I don't know, I need to ask accounts, or I don't know, I need to ask production, or I don't know, I need to ask manufacturing. So we then developed a checklist. Now, this is a Word fillable form and clients would fill it out and send it to us. But again, that's not really as efficient or innovative as it could be. So what we then trialed, experiment and played with in Bolter, and we've now rolled this out both within Bolter and within Clifford Gilson, is a whole suite of things that were automations. So for example, in Bolter, when we had clients that might want to contact us for an appointment, well, we thought, well, this is really silly. We've got people going backwards and forwards on the phone, proposing by email several options for appointments, and then we'd wait for them to come back. It was very inefficient. So we thought, well, okay, let's trial a nice automated link to a calendar where people can come in and they can book their consultation. We make the availability available. This is not so unusual. People, I'm sure, have seen this. Then we thought, well, okay, we have a lot of time that's being spent onboarding a client, asking them about their preferences. And so what we thought we'd do is, using some Power Automate Microsoft functionality, we thought we'd start onboarding clients through an interview process where we get some background information about the client's expectations, what they liked or didn't like, get some of their details, they're populating it, less likely that errors will be made. And moving through, I can't move through because I haven't filled it out, but you can get the message. So what we started to do was experiment and play around ways we could build efficiencies and reduce errors and reduce some of those double and triple touch moments. Then we thought, well, let's take this to the next level. So, okay, someone needs a privacy policy. So then we thought, well, let's build an interview around how we might construct the privacy policy so that our templates can be utilised in a very effective manner, with answers to questions that are interview based on a web form. And then that data comes to us and we reverse merge that data back into our software that runs our precedents and templates to then create the privacy policy or privacy statement that might need to be created for a client. Similarly, for our terms and conditions, so the client is sent a link, they dial in, they complete the questions in the interview, and then that comes to us and is used to reverse merge into our software so that then it creates the template document. So it's reducing the cost of production, it's reducing the double, triple touch and risks of errors. It's admittedly, some clients don't actually know some of the answers to some of these questions, so we still have to have the lawyer checking the document. It's amazing how many clients don't actually know the correct trading entity. They think of it in another vernacular, maybe just the business name, and they're not really aware of the structure. But that said, it still creates some significant dividends in terms of efficiencies. And then, of course, at the end of the matter, it's always important to check how things have gone, so we can easily send out that client survey. And using the Power Automate function, it creates a very, very effective data collection point where we have all of that survey data effectively populated to an Excel spreadsheet. At any moment in time, we can access it. We can see the trends that are occurring. If there's a particular complaint or concern that continues to show up as a pattern, we can act upon it rather than anecdotal, gut feeling based on maybe there was someone who said something about that 3 months ago, or there was someone who said something about that 7, 8 months ago. You actually have real data that you can access real time, any moment you like, and you'll see the trend or you'll see the concern and you'll be able to act upon it. So I thought sharing that might be a useful demonstration, I guess, of the experiment and play mentality that we've brought to Clifford Goulson through Bolter and the experiment work that we do there. And obviously the metrics that we're looking at are those I've been talking about, time saving, efficiencies and error reductions, cost of production, savings in terms of it taking less time for us to produce a document at a fixed fee price, for example, redeployment as SJ, rather than a paralegal or secretary spending a lot of time with data entry, they're being redeployed to do more high skill work, their best work, as opposed to their poorer work. So that's the experience that I wanted to share. And I think the next slide might be back to you now, SJ.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ben. And welcome and hello to all our fellow innovators. Really appreciate it. Metrics are our mission responsible in legal innovation. As legal professionals, we've all got limited time and resources to invest in innovation. So we absolutely want to invest those in the place that they're going to deliver the best returns for us. And we want to pursue legal innovations that, one, are most likely to succeed, and we've already talked a little bit about that, and also, two, add the most value to our organizations. And as we've discussed, research shows that most innovations don't succeed. So they're literally mission impossible. So metrics can actually give us an early indication if the mission's challenged, so we can actually make adjustments to the mission to try and ensure success, or we can actually completely pivot and redeploy our resources to some other innovation project. So my mission will be successful today if all of you take away just 3 key things about the right metrics. And there's 3 nice little comments. 1, diagnostic data. 2, action activators. And 3, success signposts. So let's just look at that. Diagnostic data. A set of numbers is just giving you information about a process or activity. Quality metrics correctly represent the real world and are unaffected by goals or targets or incentives and so on. It's those sorts of metrics that you really want to focus on because they're telling you real things about your project. Number 2, action activators. So use those metrics to make decisions or to take action. So the insights from those metrics enable us to make changes to increase the likelihood of success. So don't collect metrics if you're not going to use them to either make a decision or take an action. Make sure you collect metrics that are going to add value to your decision making or the actions in your innovation. And the third thing, I'm calling them action activate or success signposts. These are actually signposts indicating what's the likelihood that my mission's going to be successful. And it can be used to make decisions about go, no go on your project. So I call them success signposts. Sometimes they're mission impossibility signposts. And it's really important to listen to those messages that the metrics are telling you. Metrics or success signposts are leading, but they're also following indicators of mission success. So you use them to decide what mission am I going to pursue, but as you go forward, then you are actually using them to demonstrate to your stakeholders that the mission was successful or the mission is delivering the goals and the targets that were expected or postulated. So now I'm going to share a couple of personal stories about some of my innovation missions. Of course, that's just all between us here today. One of the things I want to say about it is my key philosophy is don't let concern about getting the metrics absolutely right stop you from trying things. Metrics can be changed, they can be tweaked, and you learn so much just from the experimental project. So that really is my mission. And I kind of want to share with you that, you know, the metrics I've used for some of my innovation projects, they're not fancy, but they were enough to get us going. And I really want to encourage everyone, if you're not one of the gurus on our call, please get going with innovation and use metrics to your advantage. So I just want to talk about, first of all, diagnostic data in the context of my early innovation journey. So when I started my innovation journey, which coincidentally was about the time I met Terry, I was involved in an AI project. And what we were trying to do was we're trying to find out, can we get AI to read comments from counterparties and figure out what change they want to our procurement contracts and then make those changes. And of course, to do that, the metric that we used was the F1 score, which is actually a measure of the accuracy of the way the AI would classify the counterparty's responses. So F1 essentially identifies false negatives and false positives to give you a pretty accurate evaluation of how well your AI is working. But the F1 score was not the only metric. There were other metrics too, including how much time do our subject matter experts have to invest to annotate the training data to train the AI. So keep that in mind, and let me just rock back to the F1 score. When we started, the metrics on the F1 score were absolutely dire, dreadful, terrible. But you know, sometimes bad metrics are really valuable, right? Because it told us we had a real problem. And so we went back and re-examined the training data and the classifications, and we realized that actually the way we'd done something was very confusing to the artificial intelligence. So the metrics actually gave us an early indication that we needed to go back and fix something. And actually, we did go back and fix it, and we ended up with an F1 score of over 80%, which for those of you gurus or techies, you'll know that's a really good score, right? So the tech worked because we got the metrics early and we used it to make decisions and take action. Now to the other metric about subject matter expert time. It took a really long time to annotate, and the volume of data that was required at that time, it's different now, at that time was absolutely legendary and frankly prohibitive. So in that case, those metrics gave us a really early indication about what was really possible in terms of the success of that innovation at that time. And that's why I like to talk about failure in innovation as being interim failure, because sometimes you might just try something a little too early. But put it on your bookshelf and always be ready to revisit it, once again using those metrics to analyse how it's going and get early indications of whether it's something worth pursuing or something that you pop back on the shelf once again. Now let's talk about metrics providing actionable insights. You know, we talked about the F1 score being dire, and that F1 score was an action activator for us. We looked at it and we took action. And then the success signpost, that was about the subject matter expert's time, which was simply too much. So we looked at the diagnostic data, the action activators, and the success signposts. So there's an example from my own experience of how we really used metrics to actually help us make good decisions and take good actions in relation to an innovation project. So now I want to talk a little bit about the difference between goals and metrics. And Ben, you touched on this, and I think it's just really valuable. You know, here's a simple example, right? Imagine I want to lose weight, right? So my goal is to lose 5 kilos. That wouldn't be the metrics. That would be the goal, the ultimate goal. I've achieved my objective. But what I'd be interested in is some sort of metrics that are going to give me an indication. How am I tracking against my goal? Things that are sort of going to indicate that I'm on track. So that would be, you know, how many calories I consume and how many workouts I complete. I want you to imagine that those metrics were the goal. It might really incentivize me to maybe cheat a little bit, to, you know, not include that sneaky snack I had, or maybe not to do kind of slow exercise in my 30 minutes workout. So that's what's really important. This is what's called Goodhart's law, about when a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a measure, which is why metrics are really important to be real world constructs, unaffected by people chasing goals and so on. And that can be difficult, but it's really important as innovators that we are open to what the data is really telling us, the real data. We're not trying to skew the data to make it look like we're, achieving something, because when that happens, ultimately, it just doesn't work. So I want to give you a little fictional story about that. I want you to imagine, this is fictional, I want you to imagine that there is a goal in the emergency department of a hospital that patients must be either discharged or put in a ward within 4 hours of turning up to emergency. And I also want you to imagine that the executives' bonuses are predicated on achieving that goal. Well, humans are very innovative. So one way to achieve that goal might be if you curtain off a section of the emergency department, and then as that 4-hour time frame starts rocking around, you just wheel the patients into that area and you call it a ward. Voila, you've achieved your metrics and your goal. But of course, that's not really achieving what you really want to occur, which is people being well looked after in the emergency department. So it's really important to think very carefully about those metrics to make sure they're not driving behaviours that actually you really don't want, and outcomes that really don't deliver what you ultimately are seeking. So here's ways to test whether your metrics are good. So metrics add value to your project if they support achieving your mission and your goal. So the AI example, this was the accuracy F1 score and also the subject matter time. If they provide actionable insights, so this is your diagnostic data. So the bad results in my F1 score enabled us to take a detailed look and take action. And then action activators, which are used to make project decisions, go and no go. So I really encourage you, when thinking about your metrics, don't have too many, but make sure they're like really useful to add value to your project. And now I just want a short interlude for mission calibration. And this is particularly to the gurus amongst us. Look, metrics are a topic worthy of a whole career of research,
Absolutely.
a consultancy of practice, and a lifetime of dedication. And we don't have that long, and I certainly don't claim to be an expert. But look, in the experimental, curious, dynamic world of legal innovation, let's make a pact here to keep innovating and not to be so concerned about choosing the best metrics. We don't want to have analysis paralysis. What we want to do is accept that metrics are experimental and we can modify them, we can change them, even change them completely as we learn more. So in legal innovation, let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good. And look, for those of us on the call who are a bit like me, not a metric master, let's focus on the good news. And that is that we can get along okay in legal innovation with some pretty simple metrics. And now I'm just going to share a few examples, a few practical examples of how some really simple metrics have been useful in some projects that I've been involved with. So I mentioned to you that I'm part of the Legal Technology and Innovation Committee. We've got a really simple goal. Our committee is trying to connect in-house counsel so we can learn from each other and share practical tips about innovation. So that's our goal, right? So we had an idea, let's have geek out sessions, fast 30-minute sessions. We get lawyers together, we share, we'll see if that works for our constituents. So you know what? Our metrics were like super simple. First of all, we started with feasibility, where we asked the committee members, do you think this would be useful? It was just an anonymous survey, that's it. And 100% of the committee felt it was useful. Then we also asked them anonymously, we need some volunteers. And we got that. And then we asked them, we need someone to organise. We got that. So these were the things that we absolutely needed to actually take this to the next step, which was the pilot. So now we actually have geek outs. And at the end of the geek out, again, we send an anonymous survey. We ask the participants to give us an NPS, or a net promoter score, so out of 5 stars. So right now we're sitting at a net promoter score of 4.72 for our geek outs, which is pretty good, right? It's pretty successful. And in the anonymous surveys, 100% of our participants want to come again. So that's pretty cool. The other metric that we're tracking is where our participants are located, because we're trying to connect people from all around Australia. So that piece of data enables us to take action, which is to find people from other places and hope to connect them. So, you know, if you're there from South Australia and the Northern Territory, there's some of the areas where we're really looking to connect legal counsel through our geek out process. So you can see, like, really simple metrics, but seems to have worked in helping us to move towards our goal. So now let's move on. I want to talk to you about Project FIDO. So FIDO is short for First Draft Optimizer. And yes, it is a canine context, because if you feed FIDO data, he'll fetch your first draft fast. So FIDO is short for First Draft Optimizer. And again, you know, all we wanted to do in our goals here is we wanted it to be faster than the manual method, and we wanted people to use FIDO without having any training whatsoever. And here's the most important thing, we wanted people to use it. So our goals were like super simple. So the metrics, we actually timed people creating a contract using FIDO, and then we timed them creating a contract using the manual method. Really simple metrics. So FIDO was about a third faster than the manual method. Then we actually gave people the link to FIDO and said, there you go, see if you can use it without any training. So the answer was binary, yes or no. You can either use it or you can't. And it was 100% people could use it without any training. And then we surveyed them after they used it to ask them, what do you prefer? Do you prefer FIDO? Do you prefer the manual method, or do you have no preference? And again, it was all anonymous because we wanted real data, right? We didn't want people to say what they thought we wanted. So the front end users were really, really keen on it. They preferred FIDO overwhelmingly. Now, in my project goals and metrics, one of the things that I missed, and I'm sharing here, was one of the goals I should have had, or one of the metrics I should have had to support the goal, was actually a metric to evaluate the support of managers and supervisors. So these were people who wouldn't actually use the app, but supervise those using them. And so I realized that that was a gap. So that was added as another metric to evaluate by anonymous surveys how people further up would evaluate FIDO and how much they supported it. So there's an example of how, you have a metric, but you need to change it over time and you learn from it. And that's really important. And here's our last example here. So this was a ML. ML refers to machine learning, which is a type of artificial intelligence. And yes, I'm sure you're seeing a theme here. I'm quite interested in machine learning as part of artificial intelligence. So here the goal was to build a machine learning model to save subject matter expert time in classifying documents that they had to review. So we could actually give the right set of documents to the right subject matter experts straight up, rather than asking them, look at all these documents and tell us which ones you need to review. So the metrics, again, very simple. It was accuracy of classification by the ML model. So that's the F1 score again. And then the time that was taken for the ML model to classify it compared to the baseline classification. And then how much time it would take us to create this model. Again, not fancy, but sufficient for us to deliver a successful project. What we didn't want to do is spend way more time developing the machine learning model than it would actually take our experts to classify the documents. And to ensure we did that, we tracked how much time we spent on building the model, because the time was time boxed. And there was a limit at which we would say, this is mission impossible, it's failed, we'll put it on the shelf. There's lots of different types of metrics: operational, project management, financial, marketing, and I've actually got them on the next slide. If you have a look at the slide, you'll see it can be absolutely overwhelming. All I want to say is simple sometimes works, and there are lots of cool resources to help you in this. In particular, if you're using vendor technology, the vendors are a fantastic resource on metrics. They've developed metrics and formulas to establish clear business cases and also returns on investments for their technology. So really, really leverage that tremendous expertise that resides in technology vendors. And then finally, metrics are mission responsible. I want to just recap, because my mission is drawing to a close. The three key things about the right metrics are: the right metrics give us diagnostic data, a set of numbers that get information about a particular process or activity and represent the real world, unaffected by goals or targets or executive incentives. The right metrics are action activators. They're used to make decisions or to take actions, and the insights from metrics enable us to make changes in real time to increase the likelihood of success. Importantly, metrics are only valuable if we actually use them. And the third thing is, the right metrics are success signposts, or mission impossibility signposts. They are leading and also following indicators of mission success. And to close, here's a quote from Peter Drucker: ensure that every measure of performance is pertinent to the achievement of the goal or the value of the organisation. Otherwise, you risk misdirecting the organisation. And to paraphrase that, metrics, mission responsible. Ben, Terry, over to you now.
Fantastic,
Thank you.
SJ, fantastic. And everyone can see how passionate you are in the way that you've delivered your part of the presentation. So I'm very grateful to be tagging along for the journey with you. Well done.
Thanks so much, Ben. And look, I really appreciate the examples that you gave. I think it's really important to share practical examples. And, that's one of the things that I think has been the most valuable thing about Geek Out sessions. People actually show real world innovations that they've done in the real world. And the real world is kind of ugly sometimes.
It can be frightening as well as ugly, can't it? The one thing I wanted to add, I guess, is I was thinking as you were speaking, there's got to be something at stake, doesn't there? I mean, measuring with a metric, it has to be considered in the context of, well, what's at stake? There's got to be some set of two or more realistic alternatives that you then will choose from. And if you're measuring for the sake of measuring, well, that's going to get you nowhere. You've got to be identifying a metric and measuring it with something at stake. And that's often overlooked. People often, when they're stepping back from a particular project or an opportunity, they're identifying measurables, and they're not necessarily asking that deeper question, which is, well, what's at stake here? What are the two alternatives or more than two alternatives that metric and the data that we gather will help us? It will either determine the right decision, or it will be information that we can gather to illustrate or indicate a potential path. That's something that people forget, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point because, of course, the alternative, the always available alternative to a legal innovation is the status quo, do nothing. And, in some cases, that's what's happened. We've tried an innovation, but the metrics are telling us actually do nothing is the right answer, at least at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's about change is hard. And sometimes it's about there's a journey that needs to be gone through before people are ready for change and ready to put their toe in the water around the efficiency dividend or around the pain-solving solution.
And metrics are a good indication of that.
Absolutely.
Fabulous presentation. Thank you very much, both of you. And folks, if you do have a question, now's the time to put it in that Q&A bubble at the end of the screen. I wanted to ask you both this question. As I was listening to your conversation and the presentation, what I was struck by was the commonality in terms of your focus and perhaps the need for looking at ROI and metrics, coming from a law firm side and an in-house side, that there is commonality there. We've read a lot in the press, and actually relatively recently, quite a strong emphasis on this focus on data. We've heard about legal tech for a long time, and of course data and tech are pretty closely connected, but it seems to me that there's now an increasing focus also turning to this whole question of return on investment and metrics in a broad sense. So I think we used to always think particularly about return on investment in a law firm sense. It was all about finances. Now we're talking about this in terms of for our clients, but for ourselves, our own organisations or law firms, things like compliance and diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, and environment, social and governance issues. So I wanted to ask this question of both of you, in this looking at it and involved in it day to day. Is that anecdotal, or are you actually experiencing this in your practices, that there is much more of a focus on data and interpreting it, and therefore linking it to a much broader perspective on return on investment and metrics? It's a good question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, Terry, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we as in-house counsel are hearing a lot more from our management, and I'm talking generally, the in-house counsel that I'm connected with, is what's the data for that?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, right? Because we should be data-driven organizations, because it helps us to understand the baseline and to make better decisions.
Yeah.
I think my way in there is that there is an increased emphasis on simplicity of data presentation. We've all seen dashboards developing and going off the charts in terms of Everyone is wanting the data, but now they're wanting the data presented in a simplified fashion, whether it's a pie graph, whether it's a trend line, whether it's a trend to norm or a departure from norm, historical. So that's what I'm seeing, whether it's in-house in this law firm, or whether it's in discussions at Legal Practice Management Association events, or whether it's talking to in-house counsel at clients. There is this appetite for simplified data, so that there is a quick, ready, we all have gut feelings. We all have historical experiences that inform a gut feeling. A lot of what we as lawyers do is to analyze, and our brain is an amazing computer that can recollect all of these past events subconsciously and have a gut feeling generated around a risk. Well, what metrics and the capture of those metrics, if they're the right ones, and then the simplified presentation through dashboards can do, is reinforce the gut feeling and give confidence to the gut feeling. That's what I think is a trend that I'm seeing, Terry.
I'm wondering also if that, and this is a question again to both of you, I'm wondering also if the focus on dashboards and being able to see that at a glance information is also very much connected with the speed with which one now has to manage and make mid-course corrections. So in other words, this is all tied ultimately to the agility of the organisation, which is another thing that's hugely in focus, it seems to me, at the moment. SJ, let me address that question first to you. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Absolutely, totally agree, Terry. And actually, to build on that, one of the things I think we as in-house counsel love about dashboards is, one, yes, it can confirm your gut feel, but also it can reveal some heretofore unknown insights, which will enable you to deal with things that before you didn't know existed. So that's exciting. The second thing is real-time data. How fabulous is that? So you don't have to go and find all the data and put it in. And the third thing about dashboards, which I love, is it enables people to interrogate the data to look at the things they're particularly interested in. And we're all interested in different things. So the one source of truth, but with the functionality so that people can look at the things that they are interested in, I think is wonderful. It really unlocks the data. It turns data into information, and it turns information into sensible actions.
With a precision focus, as you say, right? Ben, are you seeing that as well, kind of on the law firm side?
Yeah, no, exactly right. The biggest risk, I think, is even if you look at Power BI, the Microsoft solution that's increasingly being used in law firms and with clients. The really critical thing is to make sure that it's very personal to your organization, and it must tell a story about your organization. So the only thing that I would say is there's a bit of a warning out there for us all, is if we don't personalize the storytelling of the dashboards, you might be getting the wrong data or presented in a skewed way. So that's the only qualification. I think in a desire for immediacy and beauty, aesthetic beauty, I'm seeing that, I'm hearing that. People don't want Excel spreadsheets. They want beautifully presented, graphically amazing charts, but it's got to be personalized. The story of the dashboard must be personalized to the organization. And that means you've got to invest a bit of time to make sure that the dashboard is actually pulling the right data in the right context. I mean, at the end of the day, a measurement is just a point in time data set. A metric is a contextualized data set. Yeah. We need contextualized measurements, not just measurements.
Absolutely. So we do make those great decisions that both of you have spoken about. Sadly, we've come to an end, and it is very sad because I love chatting with both of you, and most particularly, this focus on ROI and metrics. As I said at the beginning, we're probably not spending as much time as we need to very often to go to your point, Ben, in our innovation projects, but it's just so critical because it answers, and as you've said, SJ, it raises so many questions that can help us, you know, not just mold our projects, but actually deliver what we really need and our organisations want as well. So thank you very much again. Really, really appreciated your time, Ben and SJ. Thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciated having you here as well. I know that Ben and SJ are open to you approaching them through particularly LinkedIn. You'll find them both there very easily, if not in a bunch of other places. And so do reach out to them if you have other questions after this, or I find with some of these sessions, you kind of have to, you know, think them through a little bit sometimes to come up with the question. So I know it won't expire. The time won't expire when you can reach out to them. So please do that. And if you would like to learn more about the work of the Centre, please also do contact us through LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter as well. Thanks again, Ben and SJ. Thanks again, everyone, for attending. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
All the best to you and all those you hold dear. Bye-bye.
Bye.